Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Black and Blurred. This is Brandon here, and I'm sorry ahead of time if I sound like some type of Muppet. I'm getting over some type of coldness. I want to say it's a cold, whatever it was, it just didn't feel like a normal cold. So it's that time of year, though, where things attack us, and we have three boys, so it's cyclical. As soon as we get healthy, they tear us down again. But it's good to be with you guys. Good to be back with another episode, guys. I have an exciting episode, a thought-provoking episode, a necessary and relevant episode as we continue to just traverse our current landscape of Christianity in the world and in America, the calling of the Christian on this world, the desire to see the nations reclaimed under the Lord's name. So I want you to tune in because we are talking about content that can definitely ruffle feathers. In a negative sense, it can ruffle feathers where people are hearing some of the things that we're talking about and they experience some cognitive dissonance. It's some worldview, paradigm shifting stuff. And so the knee-jerk reaction is to push against it. Or it can ruffle feathers in that you are a longtime listener of this podcast. You know that we expose the darkness, but the way that you want to combat the darkness is in a worldly fashion with your flesh. So, with that said, before I invite on our guest, I want to highlight this excerpt from Charles Spurgeon. And it came from a sermon of his that he preached in 1859, and it's called Holy Violence. This is coming out of a passage that he preached that was rooted in Matthew 11:12, says that from the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of God suffers violence, and the violent take it by force. He says this: frequently complaints are made in surprise, expressed by individuals who have never found a blessing rest upon anything they've attempted to do in the service of God. Quote, I've been a busy Sunday school teacher for years, unquote, says one. End quote, and I've never seen any of my girls or boys converted, unquote. No, says Spurgeon, and the reason most likely is you have never been violent about it. You've never been compelled by the divine spirit to make up your mind that converted they should be, and no stone shall be left unturned until they were. You've never brought by the Spirit to such a passion that you have said, I cannot live unless God bless me. I cannot exist unless I see some of these children saved. Then, falling on your knees in agony of prayer and putting forth afterwards your trust with the same intensity towards heaven, you would have been disappointed. For the violent take it by force. And you too, my brother in the gospel, you have marveled and wondered why you have not seen souls regenerated. Did you ever expect it? Why, you preach like one who does not believe what he's saying. And those who believe in Christ may say with you, with kind partiality, our minister is a dear, good man. But the careless young men that attend your ministry say, does that man expect to make me believe that which he only utters as a dry story? And to convince me when I see him go through the service with all the dullness and monotony of dead routine? Oh, my brethren, what we want today in churches is violence. Not violence against one another, but violence against death and hell, against the hardness of other men's hearts, and against the sleepiness of our own. Well, ladies and gentlemen, my guest today has been on the front lines of not just bringing awareness to the reality of Christian persecution, but fighting it, bringing it to the awareness of those who can be able to fight against it. Bring it in awareness to Christians that we would not fall prey to unwittingly perpetuating it and condoning it silently. My guest today is Jeff King, who served as president of International Christian Concern, ICC, from 2003 to 2025, and is recognized as one of the world's leading experts on religious freedom and Christian persecution. Been to over 80 countries, and he's witnessed firsthand the struggles and triumphs of persecuted believers across the globe. Because of his expertise, he's been sought after many major media outlets, the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Fox News, BBC, CBN, all of the things. And he's testified before Congress and has advocated for the persecuted, from the halls of Congress to the State Department, the White House, and international forums worldwide. He is the author of multiple books. One being The Last Words of the Martyrs, The Whisper. We have a book that he's coming out with in the spring of 2026 called Whole: The Essential Journey of Every Human Soul. And I've fortunately been able to get my eyes on that book Whole, and it's going to be a necessary read for believers in their evangelistic efforts and in discipleship. So be on the lookout for that. But book I'm going to highlight today, another one that he's written, probably his oldest one, is called Islam Uncensored, which features his interviews with experts, including a former CIA director. And we're going to highlight Islam today for the glory of God's kingdom and the edifying of his children. And we're doing that with Jeff King here. Jeff, welcome on Black and Blurred.
Brandon, as always, so good to be with you.
Yes, yes. One thing I left off is you are also a good friend. A good friend.
Amen.
Good friend.
Absolutely.
Jeff, first of all, how on earth, really quickly, give people a snapshot of your life. How did you end up as the head of ICC?
Well, let's see. I started off, I came out of college. I got last year of college, went into corporate banking in Baltimore, and at one of the bank centers there, an executive training program, and went into financial sales, made money. I was like, this is not going to do it. I was a very strong, vibrant Christian, but I'm like, so making money just didn't do it for me. And got called into ministry with Campus Crusade, ran around the world for 11 years. And then the end of that time, support was falling apart and just no direction whatsoever. I'm just, Lord, where am I supposed to go? And I said, I'm not doing anything until you tell me what to do. And so I'm at a retreat center out in California, and I have this dream. And in this dream, I'm talking to an imaginary businessman. And I'm talking to him on the phone, and I decide to go by his office. I go by his office, and all his workers are standing outside. And I say, hey, where's Bill? And they're like, Bill's gone. And I'm like, well, where is he? I was just talking to him. They were saying, no, he's gone. He's dead. I said, he's not dead. I was just talking to him. Yes, he is. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Then they get very agitated. This is all in the dream. And they said, we're really scared. You want to run the business? I'm like, I don't know. So that was the dream. I wake up. I'm in Cali. And I wake up, and 20 minutes later, I look at my phone, and a long-term friend and supporter had texted me or called. And so I called her back, and she said, this is right after the dream. My husband and I are connected with this organization. Their founder just dropped dead, and all I can think is, you're the guy that's supposed to run this thing. Are you interested? And I was like completely shocked. And, Lord, he says, he in the word, he speaks through dreams. And I always took that as his word, and I prayed, never expected anything. And so that's how I got into persecution.
Wow.
Yeah.
So yeah, the Lord just threw you in there.
Yeah.
Threw you in
I
there.
kind of had the background because I had a huge international background running around the world with Crusade. I was on the international side and doing a fair amount of closed country work. So that's really good training. Mm-hmm. But yeah, thrown in is a good term.
Yeah, I can attest to this, that you genuinely have a heart for the Lord's people. And not to say more so, but specifically the forgotten, right? Though in this country, there are headlines of many Christians suffering across the world. But it doesn't take headlines for them to enter into your mind. They don't leave. And I've seen when you talk about it, the Lord stirs so much in you. And I think that, it's someone like you needed to be in that position. And we're grateful for it.
I appreciate that.
I remember I was a pastor at a church plant several years ago. And because of a lot of refugees that were coming into the area, obviously many of them were coming from the Middle East and certain parts of Africa, specifically Northern Africa, some in Nigeria. And so Islam was a topic of conversation for us in ministry. And what was frustrating to me was I felt like my view of the Lord in juxtaposition with Islam, not Muslims, but Islam, I was being fought against, both locally and kind of societally. And it was frustrating to try to get people to see that Christians can actually, as Spurgeon said, take it by force when it comes down to the sharing of the gospel.
Mm.
And I stumbled across this book that really encouraged me before I had even met you, knew you even existed. And it's this little gem right
Oh,
here.
get out. I forgot that.
This,
It's just funny because before we got on camera, I was like, hey, don't forget my book, blah, blah, blah. And you're like,
that's
oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. I stumbled across this guy, and I mean, this is not super thin. You know, it's not obviously a huge novel, but it's not super thin. And I read through
Yeah,
it. I could not put this
yeah.
down because you interviewed so many people really quickly before we dive into like more information about Islam. What was the process of compiling this book?
Yeah. Um, well, and even probably a layer below that, why did I do it?
Hmm.
So, like you said, the Lord threw me into persecution ministry. And, the old story in persecution is communism, but really the modern story, it's radical Islam.
Mm,
And so I got thrown in the deep end. I had been in ministry for 11 years. So I would say I was, a lot deeper than most, but not real savvy on persecution, not real savvy on Islam.
hmm
And so I had to start digging and understand, like, what's going on out there? Why are these guys attacking Christians over and over? Why the extreme violence and cruelty? And so that led me into a deep dive on trying to understand Islam. And that was an eye opener. But I would tend to be, if you had to categorize me, I'm probably a conservative. And I had a very liberal friend,
hmm
and he couldn't hear anything on Islam or anything from a conservative side. And for me, the world doesn't divide into conservatives and liberals. I don't see people that way. And so it was a good lesson. And I'm like, if we're going to reach people, he can't hear it. Anybody can't hear it from me. If they're a liberal, they can't hear it.
mm,
And so I went out there and I found experts that they were Muslim, radical Muslims, ex-Muslims. They were feminists, liberals, Jews, Christians, apostates, everything, agnostics. And I just interviewed them all. But they all had expertise. So I interviewed them all. That's why I did it. And so you can imagine that was a lot of work. A whole bunch of interviews, fascinating
yeah.
stuff. And the crazy thing is, you get through it all, and Brandon, I'm sure you saw it. It's like you keep getting the same answers, and it doesn't matter if you're talking to, like in the book, the leading violent radical Islamist in England, who is
Yeah.
now locked up for life.
Right.
Same answers from him,
Yep.
from the CIA director, to the Muslim, to the feminist, to the person who hates Islam. It's like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
this is fascinating. So that's why I did it. That's why I
Yeah.
found.
That's a profound motivation and tactic, to be honest with you, because I would encourage people. I mean, I held it up on screen. If you're listening, this is his first book, Islam Uncensored, where he lets proponents and I would say opponents, but like he said, all of the entire gambit, he lets what Islam is be told through their knowledge, and it's fascinating, it's eye opening, and it's relevant today, especially when we see what's happening with more political powers who are very open about their Islamic beliefs and things like that. So the reason we're doing this episode is to open people's eyes to what Islam purports. That's important. I would say the same thing for Muslims. I say this with a heart of gold and with love in my heart. If you're for some reason a Muslim and you're listening to Black and Blurred podcast, praise God. But I know that there are Christians who are Christians because their mama's a Christian and they don't know scripture. I think the same thing can happen in Islam. I think it happens a lot in Islam. And so maybe you need to learn about what the Quran says, what the teaching says, what you are actually believing. And we want to at least begin to shine some light on that today. So let's start here. Islam is built on the supposed revelation to one man and then the subsequent dissemination of that revelation to the world. What is the story behind Muhammad? Snapshot.
Yeah, it's a great place to start, and just to drive your point home. Look, you can't understand Christianity without understanding Jesus, right?
Correct.
So it's the same deal. Look, this religion is built on one man, as Muhammad. He was born in around 570. He was born in Mecca in Saudi Arabia, and he was a trader as in trading goods, and got married at 25 to Khadija, his wife. She was 40, maybe even 50 years old. And then when he turns about 40, he starts having violent seizures and hearing bells, crushing pressure, he would report. These are all things he would report. Violent seizures, bells, the sound of bells, crushing pressure, foaming at the mouth. And he said he was worried that he was possessed by a demon. Now, this sounds a lot like epilepsy or something else, but it sounds a lot like epilepsy. But he's talking to his wife. He's like, I'm worried. I think this might be demonic. And his wife, who had some contact with Christians, said, no, you're a prophet. You're a prophet of God. And, truth be told, he kind of ran with that. And he said, okay.
Wow.
And so he starts trying to build a religion. And Mecca at the time, if people have images of Islam, and there's the Hajj where you go to Mecca and you walk around that cube, that same thing existed at the time, but there were many, many gods. And so his message was really, he had taken some Judaism, some Christianity, and some of the pagan religions of the time. And he said, my message is there's one God. And that was his overriding message. And he would reach out to the Jews, and he would reach to the Christians and the pagans. And he didn't really get too far. And in fact, the Jews mocked him because his knowledge of Christianity and Judaism, the Bible, were pretty spotty. And he would misquote. And so they would laugh at him and make fun of him, which kind of sealed their fate with Muhammad and with Islam. So he really grew to hate them. But anyways, for 10 years, he's trying to build a religion, doesn't really get too far. And then he says he has this revelation from God. And this revelation was all about what he called jihad. And jihad was basically, if you had to boil it down, he said that you could attack those who resisted Islam. So they were now free to go and subjugate the world to God and use violence if they were resisted.
And this is coming still from the revelation. He's being
Yes.
told this is okay, and we have to trust that that's what he was told.
Yes. So this is what he's saying. So again, 10 years, can't get anywhere, comes up with this idea, and then guess what happens? So he starts attracting, a large crowd with that, because basically we can go attack this guy down the road who's got that giant house, and he's got 5 wives. They're all beautiful, and he's got a lot of gold. We can take it, and if he won't submit to Islam, to my religion, and he won't submit to me, we can take it by force, and we can take his gold, his lands, his house, his wives, his kids, sell them, make them slaves, sell them off, do whatever we want with them. That was the concept of jihad. In fact, he really had a struggle, of course, with many selling this. And he said, he was recorded as saying, look, I this might be distasteful for you, but you have to trust me. And this is the will of God, and we have to follow God and not our feelings. So, and that dilemma lives on today, because many followers don't really understand Muhammad or Islam. And when they come to terms, when they come to see the violence and they say it's not an aberration, oh my gosh, it's going back to the core. Many then say, I don't know if I want to follow this. So you either go deeper into that or you leave. That's a very common thing with Muslims. So that's kind of the big story. So he starts conquering. He's peaceful at first, doesn't get anywhere. So then he turns to violence, starts conquering everywhere, takes over Saudi Arabia pretty much by the time he's dead. And then various caliphs, leaders, took his methodology and started attacking everywhere. And so as far as into India, even, you can read the historical accounts of these Muslim chiefs who were, warlords who were going into India, and they said there was no end to the killing. They couldn't. There were just so many people. They said it was unending. So they actually had to come up with a different system rather than just total submission and death. But anyways, that was the story. Islam spread by the sword, and those early victories, that's really the borders, for the most part, that's the borders of Islam today.
Yeah.
So
what's fascinating to me as we traverse through a lot of the intricate details and history and origin of Islam is that a lot of the scrutiny that many beliefs undergo, Islam doesn't, especially in our society. So I love apologetics. You love apologetics. We've heard the arguments against Christianity, the lack of trustworthiness. It's like, oh, you're just going to believe the Bible is just written by men. Even in that slanderous rebuke to the Bible, it's still acknowledging that it's written by multiple people. But here we have one guy dealing with a revelation, and we have to trust that revelation. Not only that, it comes, he said he's born 570 AD. He's born 570 AD. It comes 600 years after Christ. And there's not a lot of scrutiny in the public square with Islam.
No, it's fascinating. So, that was not allowed. Again, so what is the whole religion? It's like everyone has to submit to me. I'm a prophet. I'm the last prophet of God. Mm-hmm. So the scriptures were corrupted. I'm the last prophet. My revelation is what counts. So the Quran, he comes with the Quran and he says, this is the revelation of God. And then there's the hadiths written about his life. Actually, they're so far dated. The earliest ones, if I remember, hundreds of years later, written down hundreds of years later. But anyways, Islam has never gone through a reformation like Christianity did. So Christianity, was fused with politics in the Catholic Church for hundreds of years, for millennia. Yeah. And politics is the absolute worst thing a church should be involved with. It's actually just kills the church. And so there was no questioning. And you saw the Inquisition, you saw all kinds of mess. You read the history of the church there, the early church, and it was a complete mess. And so, but once Christianity split from that political power, very open then to criticism and attack, verbal attack. And so, and that's where, again, your behavior is moderated. So you say, wait a minute, that's not biblical. Your Bible says this. Why are you doing this? And that's a very needed thing. So Islam really has never gone through that, because anybody who attacks us, us being Muslims, anybody who attacks us, they're from the devil and they need to be subjugated. We go on the attack. We subjugate everyone by force. That's our mission. Jesus said, we're going to bring the world under submission, but we do it through love. We can't force. We only do it through love. And many people will not follow. And that's just the deal. Yeah. And this is opposite. Muhammad said, we're going to bring the whole world under submission to Islam and my teaching. And we're going to do it by the sword if they reject us. So it's never, you see it today. People kowtowing in the press because they've been attacked, murdered. And so everyone is walking on eggshells and afraid to discuss the hard truths and to debate. So most people are. Yeah.
Even in the conversations that I would have, or it wouldn't be conversations, I typically would like to have conversations with Christians on their view of Islam, but I don't typically get a chance to, because I'll just get shot with these little talking points, these phrases, and then that'll be it. And there is this very favorable view to a lot of Christians towards Islam. Yeah. Meanwhile, Islam's view of Christians and Jews doesn't seem to reciprocate. Can you speak a little bit more about the Islamic view towards Jews and Christians?
Yeah, and there's a little subtlety to it. So, boy, where do you start with this? So with Islam, it's much more than a religion. So think about, Muhammad was the leader of a state. He's the leader of a religion. So he was the leader of the government. And so it's an all-encompassing thing. And so there's all kinds of rules in the Quran and the Hadith on how to treat people.
Okay.
And so first of all, the masses have to be subjugated. If they resist, they can be killed, taken, all their goods taken, their wives taken, abused, etc. But there's a special class of people, two special classes of people, and those are the people of the book. So that's Jews and Christians. But the Jews were especially hated. They were in a special class because of that early treatment that Muhammad received from the Jews. They laughed at him because he was, he knew enough to be dangerous with the Bible and Christianity. And so they mocked him, and he never forgot that. So he absolutely hated the Jews. And that got encoded into the books. So with Christianity, it's not to that degree, but again, we are deluded pagans. We are enemies of the truth from their point of view. So, but at the same time, because we were following originally the true God and just got deluded and confused, especially on Jesus, we're going to be treated in a special way. So essentially, there were rules that were created, and these are all based on, it's called dimitude. Okay. And dimitude is the concept in Islam where Jews and Christians they don't have to convert, but they are going to live under a semi-slave status. And, you think about the Old South and black and white culture, and you'll get a lot of it. That's, and that's a demonic system. That's just the human demonic system, right? And that's a lot of what you get. So subservience, education is largely denied. You live in poverty. You have to bow and scrape to, the masters who are the Muslims, a whole bunch of subjugation. So that's called dimitude. So that's really the what encompasses how Islam intersects with Christians and Jews.
It's so baffling that we've done a lot of work to help radical Islam find its way here in the States. I mean, we've rolled out the red carpet for a lot of violence. That's not to say violence is exclusionarily Muslim. But we've done a lot of work. And one of those things was kind of silencing any voices like yours on being able to wake people up towards the reality of the Quranic teachings and what is in the Hadith. Because if you, after going through all the painstaking detail of compiling this book through interviews with so many people, at the end of it, you would just be reduced to an Islamophobic person. Yeah,
I'm a bigot. I'm a hateful bigot, Islamophobe.
Why on earth does a rejection to an ideology translate into a rejection of people in this country? Why do you think that is?
Well, I can go into this. I've watched this, kind of what you experienced. I experienced in ministry where I'm dealing with persecuted Christians, and there's all kinds of voices, including people who work for you, where it's like, get very agitated if you tell the truth.
Yeah.
And the truth was seen as hateful. And it was always, no, we hide those things. So, and I would analyze this and think about this. And this is largely a left-right thing. But what I saw was this. So after 9/11, that thing was an attack from radical Islam, supported by the Saudis. And what happened after that was we created a strategy. The U.S. government created a strategy on how to deal with this. And it was a very flawed strategy. And so you get the intel agencies and you get the State Department together, and they cook up this strategy that says, we're going to divide the moderates from the radicals out there. So there's a known dynamic that Islam, if you hit it in the face, is going to come back and attack you. And plus this is going to get a little nuanced, but there's two big branches in Islam. And if you attack, they will stand together, and then you have even a much bigger problem. So that's where George Bush starts coming out with Islam is a religion of peace. Now he knows Islam is not a religion of peace. So again, this is a strategy to divide the moderate from the radical, but it's just foolishness in the end. It doesn't work because you're up against the Saudis, and this gets into another whole deep story. But you think of the Saudis, the wealth of the world poured into the Middle East with the Saudis and the Gulf states, and they used that money to radicalize the world's Muslims. So they killed off, not literally killed off, but they killed off the moderates, and they pushed them out. They mocked them and pushed them out. They built radical mosques everywhere and filled them with Wahhabi preachers. Wahhabi is pure radical Islam from Saudi Arabia. And so that's what's going on. And they're starting terror movements. This is starting in the 70s when all the oil wealth goes in there. And they're starting terror movements. They're radicalizing the seminaries, radicalizing all the mosques around the world, and hate speech everywhere. And this is what we're up against. And so that was a very flawed strategy. But then you get so many people that are like, wait a minute, we have to toe the line. Islam is, right? Islam is a religion of peace. Wink, wink. And it's like, oh my gosh, it's like the emperor has no clothes. It's maddening because it's like, who thought this up? And I think the truth would do us, it would be a lot better. And the other thing the government has to worry about too, that if they tell the truth, people are going to be, people, when they see hatred and violence perpetrated on them, they're going to respond with that. That's what they're worried about too. We are going to start a holy war. And so we're going to tamp this down. But again, it's all so flawed. And I think the truth mixed with love is the answer. But the first thing is let's just talk honestly about what we're dealing with here.
Right. I think that's what's so fascinating about, you keep going back to this book because you get that from people. You're just asking questions and they're telling you the truth. They're telling you the truth. It's pretty profound.
From every background, every background, every political persuasion, every God persuasion, or atheist.
Yeah. What's the narrative behind the Crusade 2.0?
Oh gosh, let me think. I'm a little rusty on this. I think to answer that, I think what we need to understand is that, there are waves of jihad. Okay, so Islam and violence are fused. And that's because it's encoded in the holy books. And that's what the thinkers that left Islam have said. It's like, look, every generation, so we try to get the George Bush, Islam is a religion of peace, and we try to change the religion. The problem is the violence is encoded into the books. That's where it's coming from. So it was Muhammad's words and his teachings and his actions are all encoded into these books. And he was a warlord. He led 20-some violent jihad attacks on others, personally led. And it's recorded what he was doing. And so true Islam has never shied away from violence. It's always been fused, right? And so you had that early stage from Muhammad to conquering Saudi Arabia. He dies, and then it goes out, and up till about 1400. That's one wave of jihad, and then it kind of pauses. And then we saw there's something we saw in history called the Barbary Pirates. For those who know history, they'll think of that term and they'll be like, I've heard that. It's actually in a song, From the Shores of Tripoli. And so these were Islamic slave traders, and they were capturing Europeans and Americans and selling them into slavery. So the Muslims were the key slave traders. Yeah, they were the middlemen. And so the U.S. government started paying 20% of our budget every year for blackmail and for peace. and finally went to war with them.
Wow.
And so then at the end of that period, it kind of went to sleep. And then the third wave is what I was talking about with once the oil wealth of the world poured into Islam, poured into the Middle Eastern countries, that, Saudi Arabia said, we are the keepers of Islam. The books say do this. We will do this. Now God has smiled on us and approved us and blessed us so that we can bring Islam to the world. We'll bring the whole world under submission. And they started doing all their nefarious activities.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if I answered the question, but
look, I mean, I think an aspect of the shocking nature of a lot of what you're sharing is a result of obviously it being the antithesis of a lot of what people hear about Islam from Muslims. I don't know if you've seen this. There's this, I forget what it's called. It's not Jubilee. Jubilee hosts these like one person versus 20 people things. And this seems like that, but it's more conversational. And I saw one where it was all women, 2 women who were Muslim, 2 women who were Jews, and 2 women who were Christians. And man, our sisters were holding it down. Let me tell you something. But the Muslim women, they're born and raised here, not Baltimore, but the States. I think Chicago or Detroit, one of them.
Yeah.
And I have to imagine that there are so many aspects of what you just highlighted that don't even exist in their purview regarding their faith.
Absolutely.
And I think that could even be perpetuated. There's these phrases I want you to flesh out for me. Taqiyya and kitman. Taqiyya, and it's this thing. Well, I want you to flesh it out when people think about people like Ilhan Omar, these prominent politicians who are Muslim, and she could do something like advocate for abortion. I was like, wait a second, do Muslims advocate for abortion? Doesn't look like it. Tell us about Taqiyya and kitman. Yeah.
And first I'm going to get to that. Let me just backtrack a little bit because of what you said. So first of all, many, many Muslims, just think of Christianity. Think of people who are Christians in the U.S. How many of them are deep, biblical, thinking Christians who really know scriptures?
Not many.
Not many, right? Most people are kind of cultural Christians. And then you've got a leg up from that. They're not cultural. They go to church, but, maybe they were born a Christian. They were born in a Christian family. So it's the same with Islam.
Yeah.
Most Muslims, especially in the West, they don't really know who Muhammad was. They don't really know the Quran. And this is especially true around the world, too, because radical, pure Islam is taught in Arabic. So think about the old Catholic Church where everything was taught in Latin.
Yeah.
It's like, who knows what? I just have to rely on the priest.
Yeah.
And so, and I trust this is from God and I'll rely on the priest. That's Islam around the world for the most part. And so their worldview is that Muhammad is Jesus, who Jesus is to us. That's who he is. So anything he did was right and good. And I don't know a lot of what he said, but he's Jesus and he's pure goodness and God's appointed prophet and last prophet. So that's kind of, when you're running into a Muslim in the United States, that's a whole bunch of the population. That's a large percentage of the people. And so they're not like, most of them are not running around, with a master strategy, and so people need to hear that.
Yeah.
So, but now for the people who are deep, who are deep in Islam and are involved in ministry, so to speak, and trying to advance the cause and have studied, they know who Muhammad was and they know the violence, and they've accepted that. And they said, that's the way of God. God's given us this mission. So again, anything Muhammad did is approved by God. So that means killing is, it's not only approved, it's mandated. And attacking the pagans, we would be pagans. Anybody in America is a pagan. is necessary and good. We have to rescue these countries from the devil. That's their viewpoint. Now, the problem is that we're at war. And so with war, you can't always tell the truth. And you don't want to wake these people up that you're attacking. And so in terms of the Quran and Hadith, there are two key concepts that you just mentioned, Taqiya and Kitman. Mm-hmm. And basically, if you had to really boil it down, Brandon, it's just that when at war, you can deceive and lie. Okay? Because the greater good, the greater mission is what matters. Mm-hmm. And we have to trick people. And you can't always tell them you're gonna be attacking them.
Right.
So you'll see this all the time. So with radicals that are Arabic speaking, if they're in the States, they'll say one thing. And then the very same people, when they're speaking in Arabic or Farsi back home, the most hate-filled speeches will come out of them, murder, death, etc. No compunction whatsoever. They will spread that message.
Right.
And I had the most fascinating conversation. So with that man in England who is the leading radical Islamist, violent radical Islamist. Again, he's now in jail for life. Mm. And I asked him about this. And I so enjoyed this guy because he was truthful. He was the rarest thing.
Yeah.
So he was a radical, but he was truthful. I said, what's the deal with that? And I already know what the deal is, but I'm like, what's the deal with that? And he says, most of them are cowards. He says they won't tell the truth. So it's like, for me, I'm not going to apologize. I have got, he's got the right faith. He's following the right prophet, and the mission is from God. So he will just tell the truth. And that was fascinating. Wow. He says, most of these guys are cowards. He said the same thing. They'll say one thing here, in the West, and then they go home. And so this is from his lips. But Taqiya and Kitman are the philosophies, the doctrines they're following when they're scheming and lying and saying one thing here, saying peaceful things and quoting peaceful verses, and then spewing violence and quoting the violent verses back home.
So when people are wanting to do their whole, interfaith thing.
Yeah.
The kumbaya thing. Because that's what we want. What is it? Cohesion. Or
because that's the answer.
What's the wow, my brain's not working. What's the bumper sticker?
Something with unity or what?
Yeah, it's like coexist. There you go. Coexist. What should anybody who is a coexist bumper sticker haver?
Yeah.
What should they be considering in regards to what you just shared about Taqiya and Kitman? Yeah.
Well, and then can you exist with someone who is a radical Muslim? Can you exist? Yeah. Can you coexist? Mm-hmm. It doesn't really work. So first of all, you got to understand the person's ideology.
Yeah.
Now, most Muslims in the States, at least half, it's even higher. I looked at lots of different polling of Muslims in the West. And, the UK is one thing, but here in the States, it's much more moderate.
Yeah.
And absolutely can coexist. But you can coexist and at the same time be wise and understand that some of these people, they're at war with you.
Right.
So we can't just hold hands and smile and hug and pretend like everything's fine and they're normal human beings and they're interacting in a wholesome, normal way.
Right.
Not the deal at all. But again, when you poke people's worldview, see, because that's the problem. There have been so many atrocities from the West and from Christians. That's what's going on. And these people just need to be loved, and we need to ask forgiveness, and that works interpersonally. Those are good interpersonal methods and rules, but they don't work with a religious government system that is bent, that in its whole history has been, we will take the world by violence and deception.
Right. I mean, I look at it as, like you said, majority of these Muslims, especially here in the West, probably would be willing to coexist. I think even that's a stretch to say, to be honest with you, up to a certain point. Maybe it's not violence that would be the determining factor with a lot of Muslims. Majority of Muslims, I know Muslims personally, and I've met many in ministry, and we've had conversations and debates, and their arguing point is based on Islam truly being a religion of peace. Now, are they implementing Taqiya and Kitman, or are they themselves deceived? At that point, it doesn't really matter, right? It doesn't matter. I think of it as like, if there is a 18-year-old girl that meets an 18-year-old boy who just got released from juvie, and he spent his entire whatever in juvie, and he's trying to get his life together, and she's like, I accept you for who you are. She could really accept him for who you are. But she's going to take you to meet her father at some point.
That's right.
Does he accept you?
Yeah.
What does he have to say? And the same thing is like when you can meet Muslims that genuinely do accept you, and they might have this ecumenical framework where there's cohesion and co-unity and things like that. But then what happens when they go deeper into their zeal for their faith?
Yes.
And you meet their fathers?
Yes.
Things turn out a bit differently.
Yeah. Yeah. So we need, I mean, first of all, love is God's way, right?
Yeah.
But he's also all about truth. And so we really need that too. And Islam, radical Islam, really needs vigorous debate. So, and that kind of, again, that torques people that have a mentality of we coexist, we love, we're going to not worry about all that messy stuff.
Yeah.
So, but really the answer is we need to have vigorous debate, and Islam needs to come into the modern era. Just like Christianity went through a Reformation, it was separated politically and then open to criticism, and you have to debate, and you're not in charge of everybody. Right. You're not, you have your faith. That's great. But that's what is really needed. So, and that will expose the radicals and separate them from the moderates.
Right. Because they won't allow it.
Yeah.
They won't allow discourse.
And then the moderates will understand too. It's like, oh gosh, that's what we're dealing with. That's who we're following.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always, I use your book, by the way, your book and Nabil Qureshi. When I've spoken to Muslims, because I want them to hear from other Muslims. Just obviously they're not going to accept it as gospel, but it's like maybe break the paradigm to have you start searching for this now, right? Start searching for this. One of those things in Christianity, depending on where people grew up, if they grew up in the Bible Belt and there are some things that have happened, I would say, like, let's pick one. In Christian context, women in ministry, a favorite conversation. And it's like it's an attack waged on the church of their treatment of women and how terrible it's been, which I think is one of the largest overstatements. But that's not to say that humans in sin have not reflected painfully and poorly towards women. That's a fact.
Sure.
But to say that Christianity's view of women is just grotesquely false when you look to the scriptures and you look at who the Lord is. But like you said at the beginning, at the top of our program, if you want to understand Islam, then you look to its leader, Muhammad. Yeah. How are we to view women through the eyes of Muhammad and subsequently Islam?
Gosh. This is, oh my gosh, it's honestly so shocking for those who haven't studied Islam and Muhammad. So again, you have to go back to what was his practice? What was he doing? So again, he was, and this is an interesting thing, by the way, because you can have a discussion with a Muslim, a radical Muslim, let's say not from the States, and you say the wrong thing, and he'll say, I'm going to kill you. I'll kill you for saying that. So you have to phrase things. You have to think about it because, again, everything he did was right. So if you say, and I saw this with talking to the radical in the UK when I was interviewing him. So if you say Muhammad is this, they might react. But if you say Muhammad in the scriptures, in the Muslim scriptures, Muhammad did this, then it's like, oh, well, then it's okay. Because then we could talk about what he did. We're not name calling. We're saying, so what did he do? He led various raiding parties. These are violent attacks. They're war.
Mm-hmm.
He led many of these attacks. After one attack, I think he had 500 of the men beheaded. Women, children taken. And again, go back to what I said at the top. Under jihad, when that doctrine came in, you can take the homes, the gold, the women, and if they're attractive to you, you can have your way with them. You can do whatever you want with them. And same with the children, or sell them off as slaves. But it's just, in the end, it's property. And you see that. It's so strange. You look at Islam's treatment of women, and first of all, when they're completely covered, and that's because they're beguiling and they're dangerous, and all that is it's Islam reacting to the fact that men are attracted to women. And so the answer then is we must cover them up. So it's control, total control. They can't go out into the world. They stay at home. And there's one part of the house that mixes with the outside world. So the woman can interact there, but otherwise she's staying in the back of the home with the kids. And the women can visit each other. They can't go out in the world without a male relative watching. This is fundamentalist Islam. And so there's just, it's control and so much abuse. And then there's honor killings, so that if you do something as a female, and this could be for a man too, but if you do something that shames the family, that shames Islam, you're killed, and the relatives do it. So it's just really, really messy picture.
This is from your interview with the radical Islamist. You asked him, you said, Muhammad was married to Aisha when she was only 6. He consummated the marriage when she turned 9. Do you think this example should be followed? And his response was, well, one has to have criteria on when someone becomes mature and when they are allowed, for example, to get married and so on. Ultimately, there are some things in the life of a prophet which you are not allowed to imitate. For example, in the social area, in the marriage, he can marry more than 4 wives, and he had various things that we are not allowed to do. But he needed that role as a prophet. But in terms of when someone becomes mature and you are allowed to marry them, maturity in Islam begins when the woman begins her menses.
Mm-hmm.
So the menses for the lower limit might be 9. And obviously, by time of 15, everyone usually reaches their menses. So it is when the woman reaches her menses that she becomes mature, and therefore she's subject to get married and consummate the marriage.
Yeah, and so we think about this. So people, again, this is backtracking. I should have really brought this up because that's such an example of what's going on. And when we view a Muslim's treatment of women, or the Islam's treatment of women.
Yeah.
So again, Muhammad's favorite, he had many wives, but his favorite wife was Aisha. So he wanted to get married to her at 6. And her father said, you are the prophet, but please, can we wait? And so he waited to consummate the marriage until she was 9. That's the Quran. That's the Hadith. That's in the scriptures. So if somebody comes and says, in Western terms, we would have a name for that. So if you said Muhammad is an X, Y, or Z, that gets you killed. Yeah. Now, again, if you say, wait a minute, in Surah this or that, Muhammad did this with Aisha, and again, he is the prophet. He is the example. Everything he did was good. He's Jesus. So whatever he did, it's so mind-blowing because there's a shroud that comes over the thinking.
Yeah.
And you're like, this can't be good. But at the same time, the prophet did it, so this is good.
Yeah.
And there's just this rigid thing where you can't get past. And you could say somebody else in the world, if they're doing this, what do you think of that? So,
You think that it's oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
It has to be a reflection of the nature of these truth claims. That's what these beliefs are, these religions. They're all truth claims. It has to be a reflection upon the nature of these truth claims that Christianity has yielded such a thing like feminist rejection, right? This feminist ideology, not to say that that stems directly from Christianity, but to say that we've seen feminist fingerprints on a lot of Christian, I guess, things today. In our practice and all that stuff. Yet you don't see a trace of it in Islam, in true Islam. Is that a reflection on the freedom or lack thereof of women in these truth claims and their, I guess, outworking?
Well, and as we discussed, and as you know, it's like there's very little freedom, highly controlled. You are a second-class citizen. In the end, you're a second-class citizen and you're property. And you're dangerous. And so that danger has to be controlled, that danger being your beauty or your attractiveness. So, and this is coming from the Prophet Muhammad, who had, I'm probably going to get this wrong, so take this with a grain of salt, maybe 40 wives, I can't remember. And again, and his favorite wife, he consummated the marriage at 9. This is a man who very well, I'm trying to say this correctly, he found women attractive. And so, but the answer was, well, they're dangerous and they're making me do things that are unholy. So we must shroud them and control them and bury them in society. So, because they're the problem. But yeah, there's very little in the way of freedom. And in certain countries, like in Saudi Arabia, they're trying to modernize and figure out a way forward. They know they can't stick to what they've done in the past. And so they're trying to do radical things, like a woman can drive on her own and she can go to college. So these are considered crazy things, and they're very divisive in Saudi society. But that's what we're dealing with out there.
Interesting. And so, what would you say to someone who said, like, look, Islam, as we adopt it more into our society, will improve women's rights?
Well, it's not the case. I don't know. As you know, it's laughable. But I'm sure, do people think that out there? I mean, is that a viewpoint that exists?
Yeah.
Or is that oh my gosh. Yeah.
I mean, we're our society is cooked right now, Jeff.
Yeah.
But hey, look, our Lord is overcoming. I think that's the thing, right? And getting back to it is, we want people to hear this, to reflect upon it, to look into it. Yeah. Don't just trust it, to look into it.
Yeah.
And then be reminded of why Christ came in the first place.
Amen.
I always say it's like Christians shouldn't get shocked, because we talk about a lot of dark stuff on this podcast, and we don't talk about it for the sake of wanting to talk about dark stuff. We talk about it for the sake of people actually getting a better glimpse of Christ's beauty.
Yeah.
It's like the King of the universe didn't put on flesh, bleed, die, and raise from the dead because we cuss at each other sometimes.
Yeah, we're not nice enough.
Yeah. What would you want a Christian?
We're enslaved. We're broken. This kingdom belongs to Satan. Everything in this world is controlled. Satan is the king of this world. Yeah. And that ultimate power has been broken, but not practically.
Right.
So Jesus came, the Spirit has been released, and that's trickling, and that trickle has turned into a stream and a river and a large river. And it will cover the whole earth, but the earth is broken, decadent. We are broken and so lost.
Yeah.
And that includes the Muslim and the pagan, the Christian. I mean, without God, we're just such a mess, and we have to be restored. Everything that river touches, it heals and it brings to life. And that's where we need to be. We need to take by violence, not in the worldly sense.
Right.
We need to be on point. We need to be thinking, and we have a mission, and it's not to be a club. The church is not supposed to be a club, which it always devolves into.
Yeah.
And it's like, let's have a club, and let's see, the world tells us to be nice and sit in a corner and don't cause trouble.
Yeah.
I can do that. I can be nice. I need to nice people into the kingdom. And it's like, no, we have a mission.
Yeah.
And we are at war.
Yeah.
But not like the Muslim. Our tools are not the tools of the world. That's what you're seeing in Islam. It's the tools of the world. It's worldly thinking of how to bring the world into subjection to God. That's what you're seeing. That is not our way.
Right.
We fight with spiritual tools. We fight with love.
Yeah. 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 You get me jacked a little bit. It's yeah. How dare we? How dare we cower at the threat of death when we serve a king who welcomed it and overcame it? And so that's the best you can do.
That's the thing. Go ahead. I'm sorry. That's the thing we're seeing. That's the thing we're seeing in Islam with the martyrs.
Right.
And by the way, here's another strange little thing in Islam. Muhammad didn't know for sure if he was going to heaven. That's what he said. Now, there's one sure way to know you're going to heaven. And first of all, heaven is in Islam, it's crazy because, a lot of people have heard this. It's a place where you have great food and clean water and lots of virgins to have sex with.
So it's for men.
Now, who produced this idea?
Yeah.
So, but the only way you can get to this paradise, which is you're the center of and you're enjoying, all your appetites will be fulfilled. How do you get to this place? There's only one sure way, and that's to die in jihad. So that's what you see. All these young men doing violent things. They're trying to serve God. And that's where we don't, we think of our mission. So it's always a tricky thing. Over the years, I was always very conscious of this, that when we're exposing people to this truth, it's a very normal reaction to react with hate and anger and to respond in the worldly way. But that's not our way. Yeah. It's like Islam is a prison. Islam is a prison. The Muslim is the victim. And the Lord loves that Muslim. Yeah. And these people are trying to please him and willing to give up their own lives, if anything, to please God and to be with God forever.
Yeah.
That's the crazy thing. So we need to understand that. And the Lord has brought the Muslim here. Whether you like that politically or not, you see that through a political lens, the Lord has brought these people, and they could hardly ever be reached in past centuries.
Yeah.
The missionaries couldn't go in there with any great effectiveness. Now it's different with satellite TV. But the Muslims have been brought here, and they are a very hospitable people.
Yeah.
And so when you give to them and you invite them into your home, they'll first of all get you into their home, and then you go.
Yeah.
And then when they experience mercy, which they don't typically see, when they experience true love and mercy, this is not in Islam. That's not the mark of Islam. It's terror, it's fear, it's obedience. That's the marks of Islam. So when they experience Christ and they smell him and they smell his presence around you, it's intoxicating. And they say, my gosh, that won't happen at first. But that's the way the Christian needs to understand what's going on and how we approach Muslims in the West and our neighbors.
Yeah.
We love and we reach out, and they have been brought here by God, and they could be set free.
Oh, Jeff, I really love and appreciate you, man.
Thank you, bud.
Really love and appreciate you. Appreciate your heart. I love talking with you. You and I could sit on this podcast for the next 3 hours on this same subject.
Or a whole bunch of others.
Thank you for those final words.
Yeah.
Anything you need to let Christians know? How can they be praying for you based on your information? How can they be praying for Christians throughout the world? How can they be taking it by force with their faces on the ground towards the Lord?
Yeah, I think my final word would be this. I just said this the other night in the men's group, but it's like, and I mentioned it here, and I know you'll get this 100%. We just said it, but the prayer we all need to be thinking about this, that God saved us for a purpose. We think of our faith in terms of we're the center. And so God loves me and he rescued me so I don't have to go to that bad place. And then I'm going to go through life. And that's my orientation versus we were saved with a purpose, God's purpose. Look at that doctrine of the river, starting in Ezekiel all the way to the end of the Bible. This is the Holy Spirit. This is God's work. It's spreading throughout the earth, and everything it touches, it heals. It brings to life. It brings the dead to life. So that's what the church is supposed to be doing. Who is the church? That's what you and I should be doing. And unfortunately, church devolves into a club.
Yeah.
And we separate ourselves and we enjoy each other's company and we meet together and have fellowship. And so this is the thing. We must look at that Muslim, the one who will give away their very life to serve God, and say, oh my gosh, the deceived will do that. But it's like my life needs to be oriented first and foremost around understanding that I am dead and I only come to life when I'm fueled by him every day. First of all, I have to get saved. We have to be converted. But then we have to come to life and we have to be on point. We have to be on mission. And that mission all the time, he wants to bring the dead to life. He wants to heal and bring the dead to life. And he wants to do that through each of us. So that's the thing. The church needs to wake up. It's like the time is late and the time is short. And we're just playing around too much.
To reiterate, oh, my brethren, Spurgeon says, what we want today in the churches is violence. Not violence against each other, but violence against death and hell, against the hardness of other men's hearts, and against the sleepiness of our own.